Right. Yesterday, we started with the quadratic and the exponential function. Ne? I'm going to go through the first answers again, just so that we are on top of it. So we wrote down the equation of the asymptote of g. We got that answer from the function's equation. Ne? Y is equal to q, and in this case, q is -4. The next one was write down the coordinates of d. We got that answer also from the equation, but of the quadratic function, where we said the turning point is -p and q. So it's going to be -3, which makes it +3, and 25, you take it as it is. Okay. Write down the range of f. F is the quadratic function. The range is the y values, the possible y values. So the smallest one is going to be from -infinity, starting there. And then the highest value it will reach will be 25. Okay, so therefore the range was from -infinity, not included. The infinities can never be included because it's not a specific number. And then 25 included because it does touch 25. It's part of the numbers. Right, next up, we had to calculate the length of EB. So we had a conversation yesterday. I said if you knew what E is, you knew where it is, and you knew what B is. I think the example I used was 10 and -2. Then we'd know it's 2 from B up to 0, and then another 10 up to 10. So therefore the length would be 12. But now we don't know what E or B is. But I asked, what is E on this graph? And you said it's the y-intercept of the quadratic function. And B is the y-intercept of the exponential function. And then we said to find the y-intercept is very easy. We just let x be 0. So we let x be 0 in both of their cases. And then we found the y value of E to be 16 and the y value of B to be -3. So if that is -3 and that is 16, it's 3 up to 0 and then another 16 up to E. And therefore the length will be 19. Everyone fine with that? So you see, they're actually asking you for the y-intercept of the quadratic function without asking it. And that's how they can complicate it. Because a y-intercept is easy. And that's all, that's the only maths you had to do. It's just understanding the question. Right, next, they're asking, determine the values of x for which f is decreasing. Now this is also a very common question. Now what we usually do is, we take our ruler. F is the quadratic function. We take the ruler, f is quadratic. Now, if you are the ruler and you are walking here, are you walking uphill or downhill? Up. I'm walking uphill. So the graph is increasing. It's going up. Up to that point. That's the turning point. No. Now I'm walking on this graph, I'm this ruler. Am I walking uphill or downhill? Downhill. And it's going to continue in the same way until infinity. So where is the graph decreasing? From there up to infinity. Now listen to me. This is that type of question I told you yesterday as well. We had it last term where we are asking which x values would result in a decreasing y value. So when we refer to the graph, where is the graph decreasing? We are referring to y. Where is y decreasing? And when we give the answer, our answer will be which x values will have the y decreasing. Does that make sense? Which inputs, from where will the inputs have a decreasing y value? Right, so if you substituting these x values on this side, it's increasing all the time, up to there. But if you start putting the x values after 3, the graph is decreasing. So from the x values, from 3 up to infinity, my graph is decreasing. Does that make sense? Which x values has the y result? So when you look for the answer, you look for the y, what y is doing. But when you give the answer, you say which axis is making this happen. Okay. So do you feel comfortable with the answer from 3 to infinity? Yes. Okay. Now we have one small problem. Is it decreasing at 3? In other words, must I include 3? Now if you take the ruler, let's just look at this gradient. This is now a straight line with a gradient. This is a positive gradient, né? Positive, 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 positive. What is it there? It's not positive or negative. It's constant. So it's neither decreasing or increasing. So when we write that answer, we can't include the turning point. Our answer is going to be 3 up to infinity, but the 3 not included. What can you? You have to sign for it, but I haven't given us the first place. Will you sign mine? And the other letter we haven't received. -3 up to infinity. The question might have been, where is it increasing? Then you'd say from negative infinity up to 3, but not included. It is 3. What? Oh, did I say -3? Excuse. Sorry, I meant from negative infinity up to 3. Then it would increase. But the decreasing is from 3 to infinity. Okay, now the next question, 6.6. Also one that we see a lot, but they've complicated it in this case. Do you know how to calculate the gradient? M equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Alright, now an average gradient is exactly the same thing. The only reason we call it average is
Yes, okay. Thank you.
okay, the only reason we call it an average gradient is because a gradient goes with a straight line. And this line is curved. So if I, for instance, ask for the average gradient between A and D, the gradient will be a straight line from A to D. The average gradient is because it's curved, but it's the same thing. You calculate it in the same way. You understand that? Okay. So what they're asking for is the average gradient between the points A and B. Now here's A and here's B. So it's easy. You just need the coordinates of A and the coordinates of B, and then you substitute into the gradient formula, and then you have the average gradient. Okay, that's what we're going to do. The problem that we have is we don't have the coordinate of A, and we don't have the coordinate of B. Right, that's why this one counts 5 marks. Because you have to do something before you can just calculate the gradient. Now, if you look at that graph, okay, we actually have B, né? We calculated it, it was -3, né? But let's pretend we didn't have it. Let's just pretend we didn't have it. What is B? on the graph? The y-intercept of the exponential function. Now y-intercept means x is 0 and the y I don't know, but I can calculate it. Okay. What is A? The x-intercept of the quadratic function. One option. It's also the x-intercept of the exponential function. Second option to calculate it. And if you really want to make life difficult for yourself, it's also the point of intersection of the parabola and the exponential function. Do you remember how we calculate that? We let the two functions be equal to each other. So there are three possible ways. One or two more difficult than the others, but there are three possible ways that we can find the coordinate of A. Alright, so what I wrote thus far is I said, I want to calculate the average gradient. I have the gradient formula. I need the coordinate of A and B. At A, what I know is, I don't know the x, but I know the y is 0. At B, I don't know the y, but I know the x is 0, because it's intercepts. Right. Now, to find A, I only did it in the first two ways. I didn't calculate the point of intersection. Okay, I don't think you'll choose that one. But if you used it as the intercept, the x-intercept of the quadratic function, you let y be equal to 0. Just take a moment to look. I'll give you a chance to write it down, because I want to show you how I calculated it. So I let it be equal to 0. Now you can do it in different ways. Either you can go and multiply that bracket out, then it's x squared minus 6x plus 9, and then you multiply the negative in, and then you have plus 25, and then you simplify it to a trinomial, and then you factorize it to get your two answers. That's the one way that you can do it. But this is the way that we found the unknown when we used the completing of the square method. Do you remember that? That investigation that I gave the grade 11s last year, you didn't have it as an investigation, we did it as a worksheet in class. Remember that one? Then we'd end up with something like this, after we would have done the completing of the square. And when you're done with that, you took the 25 over. Now, the 25 going over would be negative 25, but now I already divided with a negative, and therefore it became positive as well. If I had taken that one over, if you remember correctly, and it was negative, we'd know there's no answer, because the next step would be I'd take a square root. Nandile, do you remember it? Okay, so I took the 25 over, it was minus 25, but then I divided or multiplied with the negative, and it became positive 25. The next step is to take the square root on both sides. Then the square will be gone here, and this will become, and this is the only trick. It's not 5. It's plus and minus 5. And then I take the 3 over, so it's plus 5 plus 3, that gives me 8, and minus 5 plus 3, that gives me negative 2. And now if I look at my graph, do you think A is negative 2 or do you think it's 8? It's negative 2. So I know A is negative 2. Do you understand? One method. The other method, if you chose, or if you said it's the x-intercept of the exponential function, also you let y be equal to 0. I take the minus 4 over, it becomes plus 4. Then I divide with 2 on both sides. And what I also did there is I didn't like the half. I made it 2 to the power of negative 1. Do you understand? Just took it up. Then my bases are the same. I can throw them away, and I also find x to be negative 2. So there's not a more correct way. It's just the one that you prefer. Are you happy with that? You all understand? Alright. So what I'm at is now I know A is negative 2 and 0. And I know B is 0 and negative 3. Because I had B at the top. But if you didn't have B at the top, it's very easy. You said B is the y-intercept of the exponential function. So therefore when it's a y-intercept, I let x be 0. And then I just started on my calculator, I found negative 3. So if you noticed you had it at the top, it's fine. If you didn't notice it, that's the way you would have calculated it. Now you've got your two coordinates, substitute in the gradient formula, and you found the average gradient. Okay, you can write. Are you done? Okay. Now let's just look at the graph in order to answer the next question. They say graph T. Do we have a T? No. We have a F and we have a G, so this is now a different graph. Okay, that's not on the sketch. Graph T is obtained by reflecting G in the x-axis. So in other words, do you agree with me? G is now the exponential function. Its asymptote is at -4. So if it was to be reflected in the x-axis, the asymptote would be at 4, right? And the graph would look like this. That would be the reflection. Let me make it a bit darker, so you can just see there. That would be the new asymptote at 4. The graph, everything would look the same, except it would be at the bottom. It's reflected. Okay. Now the question is, what's the range of negative t? What is the range of t? Now range, which values is the range? Y value. So what's the smallest y value that this graph will reach? -infinity. What's the biggest y value it will reach? Positive 4. Should 4 be included? What did I say yesterday about the asymptote? We never include it because the graph doesn't exist there. But it exists at 3,99999999999. So therefore we have to write the 4. But we write it with a curly bracket. So it's going to be 6.7 from negative infinity up to 4 round brackets. Okay, now before we're going to do 6.8, I want to explain or show you something. I'm going to use the g of x. If I were to write, calculate g of 2, that means the 2 is in the place of x. You have to substitute the x with 2. It would look like this. 2 bracket a half, close the bracket, 2 plus 1 minus 4. And you would type that in your calculator. I think that would be a 8. 2 times the 8 is a quarter minus 4 is negative 3 3/4. I think that's what the answer would be. But I'm not worried about the answer now. What I want to show you is when they put the 2 in the place of x, then you have to substitute the 2 in the place of x. But then they can also say g of x equal to 2. That means, remember, understand how it's written. That is x. This whole thing is y. The whole thing, the combination of x is creating y. And y is g of x. This is so important. I'm going to repeat it. X, the position where x is, tells us what type of graph it is. Okay? Whether it be straight line, exponential, hyperbola, quadratic. But the combination made with x, the recipe, results in y. And that creates the shape of the graph. Okay? And y is this whole thing. This thing is y. And g of x is y. Do you understand that? So when they say g of x equal to 2, that means 2 times a half x plus 1 minus 4 is equals to 2. Okay, do you see the difference? I don't even know if this thing will work out. But if the 2 is in the place of x, it goes to the x. And if the whole g of x or f of x or whatever is equal to 2, then the whole function has to be equal to 2. And then you're going to calculate x, basically. Okay. So if I, for instance, write g of x, no, let me write g of 1 is equal to f of 1. This is now mathematical language. What it means in English is where x is 1, the exponential function is equal to the quadratic function where x is 1 as well. Okay, you understand that? So where the x's are 1, the graphs are equal. If it had a 5 there, then it would mean they are intersecting, they are equal to each other, they are at the same point where x is 5. Not y 5, where x is 5. So you can calculate what y would be because you can substitute a 1 into the place of x or whatever. Do you all understand that? Okay, so when I say g of x plus 1, you have to calculate g of x plus 1. That means, what is g of x? It's 2, no, you must plus 1 to it. G of x is the whole equation. Ne? I wrote down g of x now. Plus 1. So what would the answer be? That thing minus 3. If I ask you to calculate g of x minus 1, then the minus has to happen at the x. When it's inside of the bracket, the calculation goes with x. When it's on the outside of the bracket, the calculation goes with the whole equation. So this one would look like this. 2 brackets are half x plus 1, but then I have to minus 1. Minus 4. And it would be 2 to the power of, 2 times a half to the power of x minus 4. That would be what happened. Do you understand the language? You must remember this. Okay, this is just the language. So, it brings us to question 6.8. Question 6.8 says, if p of x, do we have a p? Do we have a p? Sure. Yeah, we don't have a p. Graph. If they are referring to this question, they are referring to a new graph. Okay, not one that we have already. But what is different in this graph than the graph we have? F is negative bracket x minus 3 close the bracket squared plus 25. P is this whole thing but plus 2. That is one term, right? That is a different term. This plus 2, is it a friend of this term or of this term or of both terms? Of 25. They are the same type. You cannot add 2 to that thing. How will you add it? It can't go into the bracket. It wasn't given in the bracket. It's on the outside of the bracket. So it must be added to that. So that means the new graph is x minus 3 squared plus 27. Now the question that they actually ask is write down the coordinates of the turning point of P. Turning point is negative P and Q. So what is P? It's still negative 3. So this turning point will still be at 3. But now Q is at 27. So that's a turning point. If I look at this question, it means P is the same graph as F. It's the same graph, except it was moved up 2 units. So everything is going to stay the same. It's still going to be at 3 there, but the y value will be at 27. That's what the question says. Okay. Right, now there's also question 6.9, but we are not going to do it now. Right, we're going to skip it for now. It's a little bit too much, too quickly. Right, so let's just skip that. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I'm going to do the next question, question 5 of November 17 with you now. And then you are going to try to do question 6, a quadratic and a straight line, on your own for Monday. Okay. Alright, at question 5, November 17, they've given us the f function, which is negative 3 over x plus 2 plus 1. Is there anybody that knows what type of graph that is? F is hyperbola. And G? Exponential. Well done. Okay, question 5.1. They're asking to determine f of negative 3. Put up your hands and tell me what I must do to calculate f to the f of negative 3. With that graph, no? That function. Right, so it's going to look like this. Negative 3 over negative 3 plus 2 plus 1. And then I can use my calculator, or I calculate without it. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Negative 3 over negative 1 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. The next question, 5.2, they want you to calculate or determine x. If g of x is equal to 4, what must I do now? Whole equation equal to 4. So it's 2 to the power of negative x minus 4 equals to 4. I take the negative 4 over, it becomes plus 4. Okay? So it's going to be 8. 2 to the power of negative x equal to 8. What can I do with 8? 2 to the power of 3, and then x is going to be equal to negative 3. Okay, I'm going to give you literally 10 seconds to quickly by yourself write down the asymptotes of f. Write down the asymptotes of f. Are you done? Was that your answer? X equal to negative 2, ne? And then y equal to 1. Please, grade 11s, be sure that you didn't just write negative 2 and 1. Or that you wrote it maybe in a coordinate. If you wrote it in a coordinate, then you mean that's a point. It's not a point. And that you didn't write P is equal to negative 2 and Q is equal to 1. all of those things that I've just said is wrong. You will get 0. And the thing is, you actually know it. You know the answers, but you get it wrong because you write it incorrectly. So the answer is x equal to -2 and y equal to 1. It must be an equation. Who got it right? Okay. Who got the right values? Okay. Did you write it incorrectly? Okay, so you remember that. 5.4. Write down the range of G. Now, the thing is, this is a bit difficult because we don't have the graph. Okay, but without drawing the graph on scale, do you remember how quickly we drew the exponential graph? Those, what, 5 or 6 on that paper. It went like this. No, we can quickly do it. Especially now because we are not as familiar with the work yet. Now, don't even use a ruler. You are doing this like the rough work in primary school that you would have thrown away. This is the same type of rough work. Asymptote at -4, ne? Is it going to be at the top or at the bottom? This graph, this exponential function. Why is it going to be at the top? Because the a that I don't even see there is 1. Do you all agree? Now, whether or not the graph goes like this or it goes like that, it doesn't matter now when we write the range. Because what is the smallest y value that it can reach? -4. It can't be -infinity. It's not going to cross. It's at the top. This is -4. Okay. And what's the biggest number it's going to reach? Infinity. Can I include -4? No, it's an asymptote. You never include an asymptote. And we don't include infinity. But while you're writing that down, the question about sketching the graph is coming up. But I just want to know from you. This exponential function, the equation is 2 to the power of -x minus 4. You know, do you know them already when it's going to be increasing at the top and a decreasing at the top? When is it increasing at the top? Greater than 1. When b is greater than 1. And when b is a fraction, it's going to be decreasing. So do you think this graph is going to decrease or increase? Is it going to be like this, number 1? Or is it going to be like this, number 2? This is the fraction 1. And this is the whole number 1. See, it's 2 to the power of -x. And what is a negative exponent? It's a fraction. Do you see how they flip and catch you out? No? Alright, but we'll get to it when we draw it. Just keep it in mind. The negative exponent, we know it means fraction. So although it says 2, it's written as a negative exponent. Alright, but we'll get to that. First question, 5.5. Determine the coordinates of the x and the y-intercept of f. Okay, how do we find the x-intercept? We make y 0, so it's going to be 0 equal to -3 over x plus 2 plus 1. I take the 1 over, it's -1 equal to -3 over x plus 2. Then you remember the shortcut, no? You swap the whole denominator with the answer. and then it's x plus 2 equal to negative 3 over negative 1, which gives me an answer of 3. And then x is equal to 1. So my x-intercept is 1 and 0. Y-intercept, we make the x 0, y equal to negative 3 over 0 plus 2 plus 1. That's going to be negative 3 over 2, which is negative 1.5, plus 1. So y is going to be equal to negative 1/2. Panele, check up. Stop. .6. If you don't have your note, the notes and the summary with you, open it now quickly. Here's one that we haven't had in a question, but it's on that page. Determine the equation of the axis of symmetry of F, which has a negative gradient. Look for axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry at the hyperbola. It's the third bolded heading. Do you see it? I told you that when you have the hyperbola in standard form and you want to write the axis of symmetry, you write everything but without the A. Okay? And then the negative one, you put a negative only in front of x and p. So if we were to write this one's axis of symmetry, we would write the positive one, looks like this, y equal to x plus 2 plus 1, which results in y equal to x plus 3. Do you agree with that? The negative one will be y equal to negative x plus 2, close the bracket, plus 1, which results in negative x, and that's negative 2 plus 1, so it's negative 1. And this is the one that we have to write. You can write down both now, so that you have it how we got it. Do you understand? Axis of symmetry? Easy. Right, 5.7. Look at it. For 6 marks, sketch the graphs of f and g on the same system of axes. Clearly show all intercepts of the axis and any asymptotes. Okay, which one are we going to start with? Hyperbola or exponential? Hyperbola. I think so too. Okay. Let's do some planning. I'm just going to write down the functions again because I'm on a new page. Are you going to try to sketch it as well for homework? Alright, you can try to sketch it at home and then you do question 6 for Monday, this one. Just try your best. Okay, don't leave anything open. Even if you do it wrong, just try it and then on Monday we can see maybe where you misunderstood something, okay?